The one consistent challenge over the last decade has been a below expectation job and salary growth rate. And depending on who you talk to, the numbers vary. The government says that, look, we're doing a pretty efficient job. Its detractors say that you're nowhere near A, the targets that you set for yourself, and B, where an economy that expects to achieve the targets that it sets for itself needs to be. The data shows the government has missed most of its own jobs and income targets. Is there a deeper problem? To analyze that, we have with us Mr. Mohandas Pai and Gurcharan Das, both of whom have been writing extensively on these issues and speaking on these issues even in and around budget season. So let me first begin with you, Mr. Gurcharan Das. I remember we spoke a year back during the budget presentation and you had some ideas about creating jobs. Are you satisfied with what the government has done since then? The budget gave a lot of support toward that end, but has it really achieved the potential?
Clearly, it has not. Rahul, our problem is two-sided. One is the fact that 45% of our people are still on the farm. So we need to take, like every country which became prosperous and middle class, we need to take people from farms onto industry. Now, we have done a good job since 1991, grown at 6.5% a year, which is amazing for a democracy, but we have still not created an industrial revolution. And we won't go into why, but looking forward, we can do it. What has helped India, the momentum India has, is in services. And that government doesn't have to do a damn thing about it. That will continue. And we have a new, government should stay out of it. In fact, we have a new engine in this area of the services job, which are in the global capability centers. There are almost 1,500 of them. Multinationals have set up in India, and they have created 3.2 million jobs in the last 10 years. Now, this will continue. Where we need the government to act is in the factory jobs. And that can be done because the preconditions are far better than they were in 1991. Today, we have far better infrastructure. Road mileage has doubled in the last since 2011. The port handling capacity has quadrupled. We have one market through the GST, so trucks are moving faster. And we've had a digital revolution, which has created financial inclusion. And importantly, the world is down on China. Many, many companies, the Chinese companies included, want to create another sourcing base than China. And India is the obvious one, but except for the iPhone, India has not succeeded in getting the kind of investment we need. Vietnam is way ahead of us in doing so. And the reason why is we still need to do the heavy lifting of reforms, all the same reforms that the government tried to do in the last 10 years. You have to do those land acquisition, labor, not just the labor codes, but you have to make it even better than that. You need to, I would say, our electricity rates are too high.
Okay.
And so on. But let me just say the most important area is that India is still not a good place, not a hospitable place to do business. It's an over-regulated economy. Every businessman still talks about it. And this is, therefore, the reform of the administration. Mm-hmm. China gave an incentive to its lower bureaucrats to bring in investment.
Okay.
They measured them. They gave them the incentive to create production. And we haven't done that. Unfortunately, our politics acts against it because there are no votes. There are votes for freebies, and there's not one politician who goes out there and sells on the basis that I will create jobs
Okay,
for
let me
you.
bring in Mohandas Pai, who runs Iron Capital, knows a thing or two about the corporate side of the world. Mohandas Pai, the government is spending more and more on welfare schemes. Some of them are beginning to appear like raveries. You're not a fan of all of this. I know that because I sort of see the stuff that you comment about. There is a need, obviously, and the need is because perhaps wages are too low or there are no jobs. So people need to be sort of propped up in some way or the other. How do we get out of it? This problem, A, of this sort of lag between our aspirations, our targets, and the reality.
Rahul, let me give some data. I think we should go with data to
Okay.
understand the problem and define the problem. Like Gucharan says, 45% of people in the working group depend on agriculture. And in agriculture, over the last 6 years, an interesting thing has happened. Women participation has gone up to 63%. Men's participation has come down to 37%. So men are migrating away from agriculture. Women who are not occupied are coming into agriculture. The number still remains at 45%. Now we have to move a lot of them to industry to get them a better income. And then we have 25% of workforce in industry, 30% in services. The per capita income of people in agriculture, I'm quoting memory, is around 77,000 rupees. Per capita income of people in industry, 2,57,000. And services about 3,57,000. And I think the ratio between them is to 1 is to maybe 3.2 is to 4.5 or something like that. So it's very clear there is no future for people who are dependent upon agriculture, and we have to shift them to industry. Now, how do we shift them to industry? Now, these are low-skilled people who cannot do high-skilled jobs. So we have to look at having 400 of the poorest districts in India where there's surplus labor, and labor is also coming off agriculture, to create incentives for labor-intensive industries to go there. If you look at China's exports, 60% of China's exports are in labor-intensive goods. So we need an incentive scheme to say, in these 400 districts, if anybody hires a person, pays ESI, PF, government will give them, say, 2,000 rupees a month for 2 years, for every new job created by DBT. And they will pay the employer's share of ESI and PF, which is a very formal thing. There's already a scheme like that called Kaushal, but do it across the country to incentivize people. Second, one of the difficulties of labor-intensive industry is the supervisory people who come from cities. Now, we have to pick up the 5,000 census towns. India has maybe 6,000 census towns, 5,000 census towns, and of them, find out what are there in these 400 poor districts and invest in them heavily, 10 to 20 crores a year to build infrastructure in the small towns in these districts for roads, for power, for water, sewage, etc., and try to build flatted factories. So what will happen is, around these small towns, many labor-intensive industries will come up. People can travel there 8-10 kilometers and go back, and jobs will be created. Purchasing power will be created there, and there'll be massive growth. This happens in some areas like Raipur, etc. For example, Bangalore has got 500,000 people in the garment industry. I mean, we don't have people in the garment industry. They come from outside. And when I ask why are they there, I'm told the supervisors will not go to smaller towns. So we got to build these smaller towns because urbanization is the key to growth. India cannot remain a nation of villages. Nobody wants to live in villages. 70% of farmers' children don't want to live in villages.
Okay.
They need other kind of jobs, and we have to shift. Please give me some time. Now, unless we have this massive urbanization in small towns, we are not going to make the shift, and that has to be one part of job creation. Then as far as industry is concerned, industry is getting increasingly automated. And the job intensity of every dollar or rupee put into industry is coming down because of automation. Automation is necessary for quality and for certainty and higher production. Now, we must also make sure that the barriers to industry What are the barriers to industry? Like Gurcharan said, high power tariff, because power tariff subsidizes the free power that states give. Give power tariff with a normal part of profit, like the Electricity Act has been saying. Power tariff, give them good roads and infrastructure, and make sure the supply chain costs come down, which is coming down. For example, we have one of the India's biggest industrial estates called Pina in Bangalore, where the roads are absolutely dirty and filled with full of potholes. I mean, it's a terrible place to work. You go to Singapore, see the park, and then build flatted factories in these 400 towns so that industry can come there and help industry become much more efficient.
Okay.
Industry has to become more productive, and that has to happen. And in the services area, what we need to do is the harassment caused by services by the inspector Raj should end. Yes, services have been growing pretty well. Tourism has to be improved. We have a new program now, but the connectivity and roads have to be there. We need better trains. For example, you go from Delhi to Varanasi, it takes you 9 hours by Vande Bharat. Why can't we have a fast train for 3 or 4 hours? So we have to build connectivity. Tourism is one area, and the second area, which is very, very big, is of course IT services and others, which are growing, which are already about 6 million people, and the other business services, another big area.
Okay.
But you must remember, all of them will congregate near the big towns. And we need to have a particular strategy for this. We got a messed up strategy. Now, as far as jobs, and I'll give me 2 minutes. As far as jobs are concerned, the EPFO says about 1.2 crore fresh people join the EPFO every year.
Yes.
58% are people in the age group of 18 to 28 for whom it is the first job. 1 crore young people graduate every year. So we are producing a fair large number of jobs. And these are formal jobs which pay ESI, PF linked to others, so the real jobs. And jobs are going up. And if you see the collection EPFO, it is about 25 lakh crores today. Jobs are going up. Now, what is the problem about the jobs? 80-90% job pay less than 20,000 rupees. If you look at the Quest report, the Quest Wiki report where Nageshwaran spoke, you see that wages have gone up over 5 years, minimum wages by 1 or 2% in many areas, because these are for contract labor. 60-70% of formal employment is contract labor and is not going up. And if you look at corporate profits in the last 5 years, they almost doubled.
Okay.
Last year, corporates paid 11,32,000 crore of corporate tax. At 25% pre-tax profit is 45 lakh crore of profits earned pre-tax. That is 15% of GDP. That is, give me 1 more minute. That is very huge. So we have to increase minimum wages for national level and the state level for the formal sector, so that people get more money in their pockets. And in many industries like IT services, where there is no wage, where there are no people talking for wages, the people at the bottom 60% have got a very lousy deal. We must talk to them and tell them they have to increase the wages, or the people at the bottom are getting exploited. We need compassionate capitalism. What we're seeing in India is mercenary capitalism, like we have in America. And I think we must name and shame them by giving out all this data to say that when companies say people are their greatest asset, they must also pay them well. Boards are paying themselves more. They're paying the top 1 management more. It has become a crony capitalism, different types. So we need all these things to be done together in the next 2 years.
So I've actually now come to the last 1 minute of this segment. It was supposed to be 14 minutes. I'm at 13 minutes. So Gurcharan Das, what is stopping us? 1 minute, please. What is stopping us? We know the problem.
Let's learn from the countries that have succeeded. The latest to succeed is Vietnam. Earlier it was China. And when the Prime Minister of Vietnam heard that India had got the iPhone manufacturing, he flew to Cupertino, California, and said, okay, we have lost the iPhone. Can we at least get the tablet? And he got it. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of approach that a lot of companies want to move away from China. And I would go to those very companies. It should be the chief ministers, like the chief minister of Tamil Nadu. He flew to Detroit when he heard that the factory of Ford was lying empty.
True.
And he persuaded the CEO of Ford to make cars for exports because they did not succeed in the Indian domestic market. Well, this is the approach that
But that won't guarantee people coming in till you give them that environment. What are the 2 or 3 things? I don't have much more time. 1 minute. 3 or 2 things that need to create the environment? What do we need to do?
I mean, right now, the iPhone story has electrified
True.
the the investment climate in the United
Yeah.
States. And it's one of the best ambassadors for us.
Okay.
All we should take all the top labor intensive leaders, brand leaders, Nike, etc., and persuade them to come because the Indian entrepreneur can give them distribution possibilities also in the country.
Right.
Many things we have. I would say this route is the fastest route I can think of right now.
Okay,
because
big factories, big factory route. Bring them, catch these people by the scruff of their neck if that is what is required. Bring them here, ask them to set up, and say that look, this is one window, and we can give you all these services, and we can expedite them. We can create a open road to a target. Rajiv Kumarji, my first question to you, sir. How do you perceive this slight blip that we saw, 5.48%? Is this something that is going to sort of occupy the mind space going ahead? Are we going to get back to 7% plus or maybe even more? What is your assessment, sir?
Hi, Rahul. Great to be on this program, as
Thank you.
always with you. Hi, Subbu. How are you? Doing well there. Rahul, on your question, I think 5.4% is a blip. It's not something that will continue. The Indian economy is most likely going to be bounce back to above 6% in the second half of this fiscal year. That's and probably go about 6% or so. But I'm a worried man. Most parts is that it will not go up to 7, as you said, as easily. And 6% is good, but not good enough in my view. And therefore, but at the same time, one must tell oneself that in a world which is where the economy is getting more fragmented, where their protectionist tendencies are on the rise, where world trade growth is getting to be slower than the GDP growth, it's not going to be easy for any economy to do 6% plus. But, and this is a big but, that for ourselves, for our aspirations, for our objectives, we need to go to that 7%, and that's something that is an imperative for India to realize its own objectives and its own aspirations, as it were. But 5.4% coming back is not a trend figure, and it's something that will soon be forgotten when the Q3 and Q4 numbers come out in due course.
But you do say that getting back to 7% looks very, very tough. Now, why is that, Mr. Kumar? Why is that? Because, Dr. Subramanian, and he's written this brilliant book, India at 100, where he's projecting some big things. But those are all predicated on larger growth rates, which, according to you, may not be a reality for the next few years. Then what happens?
Yeah, I think, Rahul, my major worry is the performance of the private investment. Let's remember that in India, the main driver of growth has always been private sector investment and private sector growth. Public sector expenditure, public capex, which has risen very smartly to 1 trillion rupees, etc., can substitute for a while. But the real driver of growth has to be private investment, and private investment has remained shy. And there are now recent reports. Yesterday, there were articles and a lot of social media saying that a lot of HNIs are leaving India, to be registered in Dubai and Singapore, etc. That's also a cause of worry. Why am I raising that? Is that I think the ecosystem to promote private investment, the ecosystem where the government appears to be in the service of the private investor, where the government is promoting and encouraging private investment and not acting as its as a sort of block, as it were, is not yet in place in my view.
Okay, and of course, many people are also sort of saying that credit offtake for industry has been low simply because the interest rates are high. There's that little sideshow that is also taking place. But let me bring in Dr. Subramanian. Doctor, look, those numbers that you projected into the future are contingent upon vigorous growth. Let's be honest about that. I've gone through most of your book, and I think Rajiv ji is sort of trying to tell us that look, the ecosystem to generate this, to draw out this private investment is not there. Now, would you agree with this thesis? And if so, then what needs to be done in specific terms?
Very good evening, Rahul. Very good evening, Rajivji, and viewers as well. Rahul, I think we must acknowledge that, like the Indian cricket team needs reforms, the Indian economy needs reforms as well. India needs to grow at 8%. That is the potential that the Indian economy has. And for that, reforms are really critical. Rajivji very rightly brought in the ease of doing business. I think this is an aspect that particularly impacts the smaller firms. And, I think there is a lot of inputs that keep coming to me. Many people keep sending their inputs, and smaller firms are particularly hurting because of some of the difficulties, created by GST and overall tax. I think the emphasis on tax, and the difficulties it creates for ease of doing business is something that must be acknowledged, both on the GST side and on income tax. And I think at the same time, we must also focus on reforms, especially at the state level. And this is an aspect that, in my book tour, Rahul, I have been emphasizing that India is a federal polity, and therefore many subjects are under the jurisdiction of states. Yet, whether it is the media, whether it is the industry associations like CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, none of us really put the spotlight on state reforms. Rahul, when was the last time you remember, a Maharashtra budget or a Gujarat budget or an Andhra Pradesh budget or Tamil Nadu budget being actually examined with the same attention that the federal budget actually, the union government's budget is focused on? I was part of 4 budgets, and we all used to go and explain the logic behind that to the media and to the industry associations, yet there is absolutely no focus. I'll just take one example to highlight. We talk about manufacturing. When it comes to manufacturing, a manufacturing firm needs 6 inputs. Those are land, labor, capital, power, logistics, and ease of doing business. Of this, except for capital, 5 other inputs are states' jurisdictions. And yet, are we asking the question of state chief ministers, state finance ministers, what are they doing for land, to ease purchase of land? What are they doing on labor? What are they doing on power? What are they doing to improve logistics? What are they doing on ease of doing business? A lot of ease of doing business is at the state level. What are we doing to actually reform the bureaucracy? I think this is something that is really critical as well. These are questions that we must be asking. And I say once again, like the Indian team needs reforms, the Indian economy needs reforms as well.